I took a $25 per hour cleaning job. I wasn't allowed on floors 4 and 5. This happened about 3 years ago, right after I dropped out of community college. I was 20, broke, and living in my older brother's basement while he constantly reminded me what a disappointment I was. Every morning I'd wake up to the sound of him stomping around upstairs, getting ready for his fancy corporate job, and I knew he was judging me through the floorboards. The few times we actually talked, he'd make these passive-aggressive comments about finding my direction, or taking responsibility for my choices. Easy for him to say. He'd always been the golden child, the one who did everything right, while I was the fuck-up who couldn't even make it through 2 years of community college. I needed money fast, and I wasn't picky about where it came from. I'd been doing DoorDash and Uber Eats for a few months, but that barely covered my phone bill and cigarettes, let alone the rent my brother had started charging me. $300 a month to sleep in his unfinished basement with exposed insulation and a window that didn't quite close all the way. Real generous. That's how I ended up on Craigslist at 2 a.m., scrolling through job listings that ranged from barely legal to definitely a scam. Most of them wanted experience I didn't have or were paying like $7 an hour. There were the usual sketchy postings too, the ones that made you wonder if you'd end up in someone's trunk. Personal assistant needed, must be discreet. Driver wanted, no questions asked. Male model for private photography session. Yeah, no thanks. But then I found something interesting. It was a night maintenance position at an office building downtown. The hours were 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 nights a week. The pay was $25 an hour, which immediately seemed too good to be true. I did the math in my head. That was $1,000 a week, $4,000 a month. For mopping floors and taking out trash. Something was definitely off about it, but I was desperate enough not to care. The listing was bare bones. No company name, just private office complex. The requirements were simple. Must be comfortable working alone. Must have reliable transportation. Must be willing to follow instructions exactly as given. Must be able to pass a background check. Must maintain strict confidentiality about the workplace. That last part should have been a red flag, but 20-year-old me just saw dollar signs. I sent in my application with a resume I'd padded with some creative exaggerations, and I got a response within an hour. Not an interview request, just an address, a start date, and instructions to come to the back entrance at 10:45 p.m. on Monday. There was also a PDF attachment, some kind of non-disclosure agreement. I skimmed it, not really understanding the legal jargon, and signed it electronically. What was I going to do? Leak corporate secrets about toilet paper brands? I didn't think I had much to lose. The address was for a building in the older part of downtown, near the financial district. I'd driven past it 100 times but never really noticed it. When you grow up in a city, certain buildings just become part of the background, you know? You don't really see them anymore. Monday night came, and I drove down there in my piece of shit Honda Civic with the check engine light that had been on for 8 months. My brother had asked where I was going at 10:30 at night, and I told him I got a job. He'd actually looked surprised, maybe even a little impressed, before his face settled back into its usual expression of mild disappointment. Night shift? He'd asked. Whatever pays the bills, I guess. The building was in the older part of downtown, one of those concrete and glass structures from the 80s that hadn't aged well. When I pulled up that first night, the place looked completely dead. No cars in the lot except for a black SUV near the back entrance. No lights on except for the lobby and a few scattered offices on the upper floors. The surrounding buildings were mostly dark too. This part of downtown pretty much rolled up the sidewalks after 6 p.m., just empty streets and the occasional homeless person pushing a shopping cart. I sat in my car for a minute, suddenly feeling uncertain. The building looked abandoned. What if this was some elaborate prank? Or worse, what if it was one of those situations you hear about where people show up for a job that doesn't exist and end up getting robbed or kidnapped? I checked my phone. No new messages. The email was still there, though, with the address and the time. 10:45 p.m. It was 10:43. I got out of the car, locked it, and walked toward the back entrance. The parking lot was poorly lit, just a couple of streetlights casting these long shadows across the pavement. My footsteps seemed loud in the silence. I could hear the distant sound of traffic from the highway, but otherwise, nothing. Just the wind and the hum of electrical transformers. I was about to knock when the back door swung open. A guy stepped out, probably in his 50s, wearing a maintenance uniform and a Yankees cap pulled low. He didn't smile or introduce himself, just looked me up and down like he was sizing me up for something. He had the kind of face that had seen things, you know? Weathered, tired, the face of someone who'd been working shit jobs for too long. "You're Jake?" he asked. His voice was rough, like he smoked 2 packs a day. "Yeah, I'm Rick. I'm training you tonight, then you're on your own. You ready?" I nodded, and he led me inside without another word. The first thing that hit me was how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the building itself is holding its breath. Our footsteps echoed off the tile floors as Rick walked me through the first floor, pointing out the bathrooms I'd need to clean, the trash I'd need to collect, the floors I'd need to mop. He moved with this efficient, mechanical quality, like he'd done this walk 1,000 times before. "Floors 1 through 3 are your responsibility," he said. "You don't go to 4 or 5. Ever. Not your job. You got that?" "Yeah, sure. What's on 4 and 5? Rick stopped walking and turned to look at me. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes made me want to take a step back. They were cold, almost warning. "Not your concern. You go to floors 1 through 3. That's it. Okay, man, got it. I'm serious, kid. You go up there, you're done. No second chances, no warnings." They will fire you on the spot and you won't get your last paycheck. Understood? The way he said, they, made me wonder who exactly he was talking about. I hadn't met anyone else yet, hadn't even seen another person in the building. Understood, I said. He studied my face for another second, then nodded and kept walking. He showed me where the cleaning supplies were kept, in a utility closet near the back entrance. Industrial stuff, the kind that probably had warning labels in 3 languages. He showed me how to lock and unlock certain doors with my keycard, and walked me through the checklist I'd need to complete each night. It was printed on this old dot matrix paper, the kind with the perforated edges. The checklist was surprisingly detailed. Specific bathrooms to clean, specific trash cans to empty, specific areas to vacuum. Everything had to be done in a particular order. It all seemed straightforward enough. Almost too easy for $25 an hour. Then he handed me a walkie-talkie. It was an old Motorola, heavy and clunky, the kind construction workers use. Keep this on you at all times. Channel 3. If you hear anything unusual, you report it immediately. Unusual like what? You'll know it when you hear it. Who am I reporting to? Security. They monitor the building at night. They'll respond to any calls. Where are they? Rick gave me that look again. Not your concern. Just radio in if something's wrong. They'll handle it. He handed me a uniform shirt, navy blue with no logo or company name on it, and a key card on a lanyard. Then he walked me through the rest of the first floor tasks. How to operate the floor buffer. How to mix the cleaning solutions. How to log into the computer system to clock in and out. It was all pretty basic stuff, the kind of thing you could learn in an hour. Rick left at midnight, after watching me clean the first 2 bathrooms to make sure I knew what I was doing. Before he left, he stopped at the door and turned back to me. Listen, kid, this is easy money, but it's only easy if you follow the rules. Don't go where you're not supposed to go. Don't ask questions, just do your job and collect your paycheck. Got it? Got it. I mean it. People who don't follow the rules don't last long here. What happens to them? Rick just shook his head and walked out. I heard his car start up in the parking lot a minute later, and then I was alone. I stood there in the lobby for a minute, listening to the silence. It was the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing. I could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead, a faint buzz that I knew would drive me crazy by the end of the shift. Somewhere in the building, I could hear the HVAC system kicking on, a low rumble that made the floor vibrate slightly. I started on the first floor, collecting trash from the offices and wiping down desks. Everything was standard office stuff. Computers, filing cabinets, framed motivational posters with eagles and mountains and words like perseverance and excellence. There were photos on some of the desks, normal family stuff. People at the beach, kids at birthday parties, dogs in Halloween costumes. It all looked incredibly ordinary, which somehow made it more unsettling. Who were these people? What did they do here during the day? Most of the desks were clean, like people had cleared them off before leaving for the night. But a few had papers scattered on them, reports and spreadsheets and things I didn't really understand. I didn't read them closely, but I caught glimpses of numbers and charts and corporate jargon. The second floor was the same. I was actually starting to relax, thinking maybe this job really was just easy money. Maybe Rick was just trying to scare me to make sure I took it seriously. Maybe there was nothing weird going on at all, just a normal office building with strict rules about where the cleaning staff could go. That made sense, right? Maybe the upper floors had sensitive information or something. Then I got to the 3rd floor. The layout was identical to the floors below, but something felt different up there. The air was colder, for one thing. Like noticeably colder. I thought maybe the HVAC was set differently on this floor, but it felt wrong. It was the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, that makes the hair on your arms stand up. And there was a smell I couldn't quite place. Not bad, exactly, just off. Like chemicals mixed with something organic. It reminded me of the biology lab back in high school, that smell of formaldehyde and preserved specimens. But there was something else underneath it, something I couldn't identify. I started with the bathrooms, trying to ignore the creeping sense of unease in my gut. The bathroom on the 3rd floor was different from the ones below. It was cleaner, for one thing, like it hadn't been used recently. The soap dispensers were full, the paper towel holders were fully stocked, and there were no water spots on the mirrors. I cleaned it anyway, following the checklist, but the whole time I kept feeling like I was being watched. When I came out of the bathroom, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There were cameras on this floor, small black domes mounted in the corners of the hallways. I hadn't noticed any cameras on the first 2 floors, but up here they were everywhere. Every 20 feet or so, another camera. I found myself wondering if they were just for security, or if someone was actively watching the feeds. I was mopping the hallway when I noticed one of the office doors was slightly ajar. I'd been told all the offices should be locked at night. I walked over, pushing the cleaning cart ahead of me, and peeked inside. It was empty, just a desk, a chair, and a filing cabinet. But on the desk was a file folder, left open. I know I shouldn't have looked, but curiosity got the better of me. I glanced back down the hallway, making sure I was alone, then stepped into the office. The folder was full of photographs. Black and white, grainy, like they'd been printed from security footage. They showed people in what looked like hospital gowns, sitting in white rooms. Some were lying on beds. Others were standing, facing the walls. Their body language was wrong. Stiff, unnatural, like they were mannequins instead of people. One photo showed a man sitting in a chair, his hands folded in his lap, staring straight ahead at nothing. His expression was completely blank. Another showed a woman standing in the corner of a room, her forehead pressed against the wall. There was something deeply unsettling about that one. about the way she was standing there so still, like she'd been frozen in place. I flipped through more of the photos. There were dozens of them, all showing different people in similar white rooms. All of them with that same strange, stiff quality. Some of the photos had handwritten notes in the margins. Numbers and codes I didn't understand. Subject 17. Observation period. 72 hours. Status. Compliant. I heard a sound behind me and spun around, my heart jumping into my throat. Nothing, just the empty hallway, but I could have sworn I'd heard something. A footstep, maybe, or the sound of a door closing. I closed the folder, backed out of the office, and pulled the door shut. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was probably just some kind of medical research thing, nothing sinister. Maybe this building was connected to a hospital or a university. Maybe those were patients in some kind of study. That would explain the NDA, right? Medical privacy laws and all that. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. I finished the third floor as quickly as I could, practically racing through the checklist. I didn't look in any more offices, didn't let myself get distracted. I just cleaned the bathrooms, emptied the trash, mopped the floors, and headed back down to the supply closet. My shift was only half over, but I already couldn't wait to get out of there. That's when the walkie-talkie crackled to life. Jake. It was a voice I didn't recognize. Not Rick's. This one was younger, flat, emotionless. The kind of voice you'd hear from someone reading from a script. I jumped at the sound, nearly dropping the mop I was carrying. I fumbled for the walkie-talkie clipped to my belt. Yeah? Stay on floors 1 through 3. I felt a chill run down my spine. I looked up at the ceiling, at the camera mounted in the corner, its little red light blinking steadily. I am on floor 3. Good, keep it that way. Who is this? Silence. Then the walkie clicked off. I stood there for a minute, trying to process what just happened. Someone was watching me, obviously, that much was clear from the cameras. But they'd been watching me closely enough to know that I'd been looking in that office, maybe. Or maybe they just sent that message to everyone, a reminder to stay in their designated area. I glanced up at the camera again. Was someone watching me right now? Could they see the expression on my face, the way my hands were shaking slightly? I went back to work, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Every time I passed a camera, I felt eyes on me. I started moving faster, trying to finish my tasks as quickly as possible. The building felt different now. Not empty, exactly, but occupied by something I couldn't see. A presence that was watching, waiting, evaluating. The rest of the night passed without incident, but I couldn't relax. Every sound made me jump. The clang of a radiator. The hum of the elevator machinery somewhere in the building. The distant wail of a siren outside. Every shadow seemed to move at the edge of my vision, and I kept spinning around to check behind me, only to find nothing there. When 7 a.m. finally rolled around, I practically sprinted to my car. The sun was just starting to come up, turning the sky that pale gray color it gets right before dawn. I sat in my car for a few minutes, trying to calm down, telling myself I was being ridiculous. It was just a cleaning job. Old buildings made weird noises. The photos were probably from some boring medical study. The voice on the walkie was just security doing their job, but I couldn't quite convince myself. I came back the next night, and the night after that. The money was too good to quit over some weird vibes and creepy photos. I'd done the math. If I could stick this out for 3 months, I'd have enough saved to get my own place, get out of my brother's basement. 6 months and I could maybe even go back to school, finish my degree. The job was worth it, I told myself. Whatever weird shit was going on in that building, it wasn't my problem as long as I stayed on floors 1 through 3. But things kept getting stranger. On my 4th night, I heard footsteps above me while I was cleaning the 2nd floor. Slow, deliberate footsteps, pacing back and forth. The ceiling wasn't soundproofed very well, and I could hear them clearly. Back and forth, like someone was measuring out the length of the hallway with their steps. I radioed in like I was supposed to. There's someone on the 4th floor. The response came immediately. Same flat, emotionless voice as before. No, there isn't. I can hear them walking around. No, you can't. Finish your work. But finish your work. The walkie clicked off. I stood there, staring up at the ceiling, listening to the footsteps continue their steady back and forth pattern. They went on for another 10 minutes, then stopped abruptly. I waited, holding my breath, but they didn't start up again. A week in, I started noticing other things. The elevator would sometimes move on its own. I'd be on the 1st floor, mopping near the lobby, and I'd hear the elevator ding. I'd look up and watch the numbers above the doors light up. 4, 5, 4, 5, back and forth, like someone was writing it up and down, up and down. But the elevator never came down to the 1st floor, never opened its doors, just kept moving between the 4th and 5th floors, over and over again. I asked Rick about it when he came by to drop off my first paycheck. He showed up around 1 a.m., driving that same black SUV I'd seen on my first night. He came in through the back entrance, handed me an envelope full of cash, and asked how things were going. Fine, I said, but I've noticed some weird stuff. What kind of weird stuff? The elevator moves on its own sometimes, and I keep hearing footsteps on the 4th floor. Rick's expression didn't change. Old building, he said. Electrical issues. Don't worry about it. What's on the 4th and 5th floors, Rick? I told you, not your concern. Is it medical? I saw some photos on the 3rd floor. Rick's face hardened. You saw nothing. You clean floors 1 through 3. You collect your money. You keep your mouth shut. That's the job, understand? I nodded, suddenly feeling like I'd crossed a line. The people who run this place, they value discretion above everything else. You want to keep this job? You want to keep getting paid? Then you forget about whatever you think you saw. You don't talk about it. Not to me, not to anyone. You especially don't go snooping around where you don't belong. He left before I could ask anything else, walking out to his SUV and driving away into the night. I stood there in the parking lot, watching his taillights disappear, and realized that I'd just been warned. Subtly, maybe, but it was definitely a warning. I should have quit right then. I know that now, but I didn't. The money was too good, and part of me, some stupid, curious part, wanted to know what was really going on in that building. I told myself I'd just work there for a couple more weeks, save up some money, then bail. Easy enough, right? But the next week, things escalated. It started with the lights. I'd be working on the second floor, vacuum running, and the lights on the third floor would flicker. Not all at once, but in sequence, like someone was walking down the hallway flipping switches. Click, 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 one after another, then darkness. Then they'd come back on, same sequence, like someone was walking back the other way. The first time it happened, I radioed it in. The lights on the third floor are acting up. Noted. Continue your work. Should I go check? No. Stay on your current floor. Maintenance will handle it, but no one ever came. The lights would flicker, I'd report it, and nothing would happen. After a while, I stopped reporting it. I figured if they knew about it and weren't doing anything, it wasn't my problem. Then there were the sounds. Not just footsteps anymore, but other things. Doors opening and closing on the floors above me. The distant sound of voices, too muffled to make out words, but definitely human. Sometimes I'd hear what sounded like furniture being dragged across the floor. Heavy scraping sounds that would last for minutes at a time. I started bringing headphones to work, blasting music to drown out the noises. It helped, mostly, but sometimes I'd still feel it. That sense of something happening just above me, just out of sight, in parts of the building I wasn't allowed to access. 2 weeks into the job, I made my mistake. It was around 3 a.m., and I'd just finished the third floor. I was heading to the elevator when I noticed the stairwell door was propped open with a doorstop. It was never open. The stairwells were always locked. I knew this because I'd tried the door on my first night, just out of curiosity, and it wouldn't budge. But now it was propped open, this little rubber wedge holding it a few inches ajar. I stood there staring at that open door for a full minute, having an argument with myself. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to walk away, get in the elevator, and go back to work. I'd been warned, multiple times, don't go to the 4th or 5th floors. Don't ask questions, just do your job, but the door was open. Someone had left it open. Maybe by accident, maybe on purpose, I couldn't tell. But it was open, and I could see the stairs leading up into darkness, and that stupid, curious part of my brain was telling me this might be my only chance to see what was really going on up there. I looked up at the nearest camera. The red light was blinking steadily. Were they watching me right now? Testing me, maybe? Seeing if I'd take the bait? I should have walked away. I should have gotten in the elevator, gone back downstairs, and pretended I'd never seen the open door. But I didn't. I stepped into the stairwell and started climbing. The stairs were concrete, my footsteps echoing in the enclosed space. There were no cameras in here, at least none that I could see. Just bare walls and the metal railing and the emergency exit signs glowing in the darkness. I reached the 4th floor landing. The door was locked, just like Rick had said. I tried the handle anyway, but it wouldn't move. Through the small window in the door, I could see a darkened hallway. No lights, no movement, nothing. Just darkness. I kept climbing. The 5th floor door was slightly ajar. Not propped open, but not quite closed. Like someone had gone through recently and hadn't pulled it all the way shut. I could see light spilling out from the crack, bright fluorescent light that looked harsh compared to the dimness of the stairwell. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the hallway. The layout was completely different from the floors below. Instead of individual offices, there was just one long corridor with doors on either side. Heavy doors, the kind you'd see in a hospital or a lab. Each one had a small window at eye level, covered with frosted glass. The kind of glass you can't see through clearly but that lets light and shapes pass through. The smell from the 3rd floor was stronger here. Chemical and sharp, mixed with something that made my stomach turn. It was the smell of antiseptic, but underneath it was something else. Something biological and wrong. The hallway was empty. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that harsh, institutional glow that makes everything look slightly unreal. The floor was linoleum, scuffed and worn in places, and my footsteps made soft squeaking sounds as I walked. I walked down the hallway slowly, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every instinct I had was telling me to turn around, to get out of there, to go back downstairs before someone noticed I was gone. But I kept walking, drawn forward by curiosity and that stupid human compulsion to know things we're not supposed to know. When I reached the first door, I looked through the window. The frosted glass made it hard to see clearly, but I could make out a figure inside. Someone sitting in a chair, facing the wall, completely motionless. Just like in the photographs I'd seen. The room was small and white, with no decorations, no furniture except for the chair. The figure was wearing what looked like a hospital gown, pale blue against the white walls. I moved to the next door. Another figure, this one lying on a bed. The same white room, the same sterile emptiness. Through the frosted glass, I could see the outline of a person, but no details. No face, no features, just a human-shaped shadow lying perfectly still. The third door, another person, standing in the corner. Their forehead was pressed against the wall, their arms hanging limply at their sides. Something about that posture made my skin crawl. It was the same pose I'd seen in one of the photographs. My hands were shaking now. I knew I needed to leave, but I couldn't stop myself from looking. Each door I passed revealed another occupied room, another motionless figure. Some sitting, some lying down, some standing, all of them perfectly still, like they were sleeping or sedated or. I didn't want to think about the or. I reached the fourth door and peered through the window. This time, the figure was facing me. I jerked back, my heart hammering in my chest. For a second, I'd seen a face pressed against the glass from the other side. Pale, with dark circles under the eyes and an expression that was completely blank. Empty, like looking into the eyes of a doll. The face had been right there, inches from mine, separated only by the frosted glass. And it had been staring directly at me. That's when I heard the walkie-talkie. "Jake, you need to leave the 5th floor. Right now." The voice was different this time. Not flat and emotionless, but urgent. Almost scared. I didn't need to be told twice. I ran, didn't respond, didn't look back, just sprinted down that hallway to the stairwell and took the stairs 3 at a time, my footsteps clanging on the metal rails. I burst out onto the 1st floor, gasping for breath, and nearly collided with someone standing by the elevator. It was a guy the first hadn't seen before. Young, maybe mid-20s, wearing a security uniform. He looked at me with those same flat, emotionless eyes I'd heard over the walkie-talkie during my first few shifts. "You were told not to go up there. I'm sorry, I just. Finish your shift, then leave, don't come back. What is this place? What's going on up there?" He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "You don't want to know. Trust me, those people. Finish your shift." He turned and walked away, disappearing through a door marked, "Security, authorized personnel only." I heard the lock click behind him, and then I was alone again. I grabbed my cleaning cart and my supplies and went back to work, my hands still shaking so badly I could barely hold the mop. I tried to focus on the tasks, tried to follow the checklist, but my mind kept replaying what I'd seen on the 5th floor. Those figures in the rooms. Those empty, white spaces. That face pressed against the glass. Were they patients? Prisoners? Test subjects? The questions kept churning through my mind, but I knew I wouldn't get answers. Not here, not from these people. I finished out the rest of my shift on autopilot, going through the motions without really thinking about what I was doing. When 7 a.m. finally came, I didn't even bother clocking out properly. I just grabbed my stuff and left, throwing everything into my car and driving away as fast as I could without actually breaking any traffic laws. I didn't go home. I couldn't face my brother's basement, that small space with the single window and the exposed insulation. Instead, I drove to a 24-hour diner on the other side of town and sat in a booth, drinking coffee and staring at the wall, trying to process everything that had happened. The waitress kept asking if I wanted to order anything, but I couldn't eat. My stomach was in knots. I kept thinking about those people in those rooms, about how still they'd been, about that face at the window. Around noon, I finally went home. My brother was at work, so I had the place to myself. I went down to the basement and crashed on my mattress, fully clothed, too exhausted to even take off my shoes. I slept for maybe 4 hours, having dreams I couldn't quite remember when I woke up, just vague impressions of white rooms and blank faces. When I woke up, I checked my phone. There was a text from an unknown number. "Your final check will be mailed. Do not return to the building. Do not contact us. Do not discuss what you saw." That was it. No signature, no explanation, just that simple warning. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it. Then I went into my call history and deleted the number I'd used to accept the job. Then I went into my email and deleted every message related to the position, including the NDA I'd signed. I wanted no connection to that place, no evidence that I'd ever worked there. 3 days later, an envelope showed up at my brother's house. No return address, just my name written in neat, impersonal handwriting. Inside was 2 weeks' pay in cash, 50 crisp $100 bills. I counted them twice, unable to believe they'd actually paid me after firing me. But there was no note, no explanation, nothing. Just the money. I hid it in my room, not sure what to do with it. Part of me wanted to return it, to mail it back to, who? I didn't even know who I'd worked for. I didn't have an address, didn't have a company name, didn't have anything. The money felt dirty somehow, like payment for keeping quiet about something I shouldn't have seen. But I needed it, I was broke, so I kept it. For the next few weeks, I barely left the house. I told my brother I'd quit the job because the hours were messing with my sleep schedule, which wasn't entirely a lie. He seemed disappointed but not surprised. Couldn't even last a month, he'd muttered, shaking his head. I didn't argue with him. I spent a lot of time online, trying to find information about the building. I searched the address on Google Maps, on property records, on business registries. The address showed up on Google Maps, but there was no business listing, no name, nothing. Just office building, and the street address. The property records listed it as owned by some LLC with a name that sounded fake, something generic like Metropolitan Holdings Group. I tried searching for information about medical research facilities, about sleep studies, about psychiatric hospitals. I read articles about unethical experiments and secret government programs. I went down rabbit holes about MK Ultra and Project Artichoke and all kinds of conspiracy theories I'd never paid attention to before. But I never found anything concrete. No news stories about that specific building. No lawsuits, no scandals, nothing. It was like the place didn't officially exist. After a few weeks of obsessive searching, I forced myself to stop. It wasn't healthy. I was barely sleeping, barely eating, jumping at every notification on my phone thinking it might be another message from them. I needed to move on, to forget about it, to focus on finding a normal job and getting my life back together. I started applying to other positions. Retail, food service, warehouse work, anything that was completely normal and boring and didn't involve creepy office buildings with mysterious upper floors. I got a job at a big box store, stocking shelves on the night shift. The pay was less than half what I'd been making at the office building, but at least I could sleep at night without having nightmares. Well, most nights. I drove by the building once, about a month after I'd been fired. I don't know why I did it. Curiosity, maybe, or some morbid need to confirm that it was real, that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. I went during the day this time, around 2 p.m., when the streets were busy with lunch traffic. The building looked different in daylight, less imposing, somehow, just another old office building in a city full of old office buildings. The parking lot was empty, though. No cars, no people, no signs of activity. The windows were dark, like no one was inside. I sat in my car across the street, watching the building for maybe 20 minutes. Nothing moved, no one came in or out. It looked abandoned, like no one had been there in years. Like the whole thing had been shut down. But I knew that wasn't true. Something was still going on in there. Had to be. You don't pay someone $5,000 in cash to keep quiet about an abandoned building. I drove away and didn't go back. That was 3 years ago. I've moved out of my brother's basement since then. I finished my degree, got a decent job working IT for a mid-sized company. Normal stuff, boring stuff, the kind of life I used to think I'd hate, but now I'm grateful for it. I appreciate the mundane in ways I never did before. I still think about that building sometimes, usually late at night when I can't sleep. I think about those people on the 5th floor, trapped in those white rooms. Were they still there? Were they even alive? What had they done to deserve whatever was being done to them? I tried to convince myself they were criminals, maybe. People who'd done terrible things and were being punished, or studied, or rehabilitated. But that didn't explain everything. Didn't explain the strange hours, the secrecy, the warnings. Didn't explain why they needed a clueless janitor who didn't ask questions. Sometimes I wonder if I should have reported it to someone. The police, maybe, or the FBI, or some kind of regulatory agency. But reported what? That I'd seen people sitting in rooms? That I'd worked at a building that seemed creepy? I had no proof of anything illegal. No photos, no documents, nothing. Just vague impressions and a sense that something was very, very wrong. And I'd signed that NDA. I didn't understand all the legal language, but I understood enough to know that talking about what I'd seen could have consequences. Lawsuits, maybe, or worse, so I kept quiet. I've never told anyone about this, not my brother, not my friends, not my girlfriend. This is the first time I've ever written it down, and even now, I'm half convinced that somehow they'll find out. That I'll get another message, another warning, another envelope full of cash that feels like hush money. But I need to tell someone. I need to get this out, to stop carrying it around alone. Maybe someone else has worked there. Maybe someone knows what that place really was. Maybe I'm not the only one who saw things they weren't supposed to see. Or maybe I am. Maybe that's why they hired people like me, drifters and dropouts who needed money and wouldn't ask too many questions. People who could disappear without anyone really noticing or caring. I still have nightmares sometimes. Not often, but every few months, I'll have one. I'm back in that building, walking through those white hallways on the 5th floor. The doors are all open this time, and I can see into the rooms clearly. The people inside are moving now, turning to look at me as I pass. Their faces are all the same, blank and empty and wrong. And in the dream, I realize that I'm in one of those rooms too. I'm one of those people, sitting in a white chair, facing a white wall, waiting for something I can't remember. Then I wake up, covered in sweat, my heart racing. And it takes me a few minutes to convince myself that I'm in my own bed, in my own apartment, that I got out of that place and I'm safe. But am I really? Sometimes I'm not so sure. I still check the news occasionally, searching for stories about that building or that part of town. Looking for reports of missing people, or raids on research facilities, or anything that might explain what I saw. But there's never anything. The building doesn't exist in any official capacity. It's just a ghost, a blank spot in the city that nobody talks about. And maybe that's how it's meant to be. I don't know what advice to give to anyone reading this. I don't know if there's a moral to this story, or a lesson to be learned, except maybe the obvious one. If a job seems too good to be true, it probably is. If someone tells you not to ask questions, maybe you should ask why. If you see something wrong, maybe you should speak up, even if it costs you. But I didn't do any of those things. I took the money, I kept quiet, and I walked away. And I have to live with that. I still wonder about those people sometimes. The ones in those white rooms. I wonder if they're still there, still sitting in those chairs, still facing those walls. I wonder if they know where they are, or if they've been there so long they've forgotten. I wonder if they have families who are looking for them, or if they're people nobody misses. Mostly, though, I wonder if I could have done something to help them. If I'd been braver, or smarter, or less desperate for money. If I'd reported what I saw instead of taking my paycheck and running. But I didn't, and now it's too late. So I just live my life, go to my boring job, come home to my boring apartment, and try not to think about that building or what's happening inside it. Some nights are easier than others. And sometimes, late at night when I'm lying in bed and can't sleep, I think I hear footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate footsteps, pacing back and forth, but that's impossible. I live on the top floor of my building. There's nothing above me but the roof. Still, I hear them. And I lie there in the dark, listening, wondering if somehow they found me. If they're watching me, the way they watched me in that building. If one day I'll wake up in a white room with white walls, sitting in a white chair, facing a wall I can't remember. But that's just paranoia, right? Just the lingering effects of working in a place I didn't understand, seeing things I wasn't supposed to see. At least, that's what I tell myself. Most nights, I almost believe it. Subscribe for more stories like this.